you a home grower looking for a little bit of help? Are you ready to learn as much as you can about your favorite hobby? The Homegrown Helpers brings you informative interviews from experienced growers that have taken the next steps in their journey and decided to help you grow top quality cannabis all in your home. Now welcome in our host, Rob Smith, along with this week's Homegrown Helper. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Homegrown Helpers. I'm Rob, your host, and bringing you cannabis growing knowledge from home growers just like you. People that have experienced and gone through the hassles of learning. And that's what we're here for, is to reduce that learning curve from people all over the world that are, willing to share what they've learned from making mistakes left and right. So all over the world includes people from, I've talked to people from England and Hawaii and just really, really awesome people. Today is no exception. I have Allie on the phone. You can find her at Allie_grows things, because Allie grows things. That's on Instagram, by the way, Allie_grows things. She loves growing things, not just the cannabis plant. We dig into her personal journey a little bit with cannabis and how she ended up being so passionate about sharing her knowledge of the plant. She's also getting an education in botany because she doesn't have just a passion for growing cannabis plants and helping people grow them, but all sorts of plants. So follow along on her journey, Allie_grows things, and enjoy the education that she drops for you. We really dig into cloning because she loves taking care of the moms and the propagation aspect, and some of the experiments she's done and some practical advice that goes along with that. Then we wrap up with another topic that she loves talking about, and that is IPM. Today's show with Allie is brought to you by our friends at AC Infinity. They make fans, ductwork, all the accessories that you need to ventilate your room. That's acinfinity.com. Use code GROWCAST20 to save 20% off all of that stuff that you would need for grow tent and grow room ventilation. It's not everything on their site because they sell a bunch of stuff for like computer fans and stuff, but we've got you 20% on all the grow room type things. We also have coming up, we have free shipping in our swag store. So you can find that by going to thehomegrownhelpers.com/swag, and free shipping right there. It's from March 4th through March 8th. So right as you're hearing this, right as this goes live, you can head over. You can also find that in our Instagram bio link, which is linktr. So Linktree, it's linktr.ee/growcast. And that's where you can find all the stuff that we have going on, all the giveaways that we have going on, which we're giving away fish shit right now. The 7-day trial. You can donate to the Northwest Families for Autism, which we just donated another $108. That's $240 that we've donated to that great organization run by Jinxproof and Miss Rose I Am. So yeah, linktr.ee/growcast. And you can find all of that amazing stuff that we are doing over here at Growcast and the Homegrown Helpers. Last thing before we kick it over to the interview with Allie is, if you'd like to apply to be on the show, if you have a unique stance, something to share, reach out. You can apply at thehomegrownhelpers.com/apply. So without further ado, let's kick it over to the interview with Allie. And welcome to the show, everybody. I think we're going to have a great one in store for you today. I have Allie on the line from Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome to the show, Allie.
Hi, happy to be here.
Why don't we start you off with just telling the audience a little bit about yourself and your relationship and history with cannabis.
Yeah, so I started out in the medical cannabis industry in Washington, actually, and kind of just started out as a trimmer, moved my way into the garden, and I had been gardening a long time. I've always had like a really deep interest in plants, and it kind of became a way for me to understand more about plants and get paid for it. um, and, as I learn more about just how deep into science cannabis goes with the medical implications and, just the way that the plant grows with nutrients and soil life and all of that stuff, it just became something that just consumed my whole life.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
So I actually ended up finally getting myself into school for botany and chemistry. And so I'm trying to learn more and evolve more and hopefully be able to educate people more on how to grow their own plants.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing your email address? Or is that by chance your IG handle as well?
Yeah, it's actually the same as my Instagram handle. It's just Allie Grows Things. On Instagram, there's a underscore. It's Allie_grows things.
So what other plants do you grow?
So I have a small variety of houseplants that I nurture. I've got a handful of varieties of Monstera. I've got some really basic things like snake plants and pothos and a handful of different cacti and succulents and agave, things like that.
Awesome. Awesome. Can you give us a brief rundown of the status of the legalization of cannabis in Arizona?
So cannabis in Arizona is currently legal medically. We're underway of trying to get a few things legalized. There's a lot of people who are kind of pushing for recreational, but we're also pushing to legalize home growing, which is really, really exciting.
Awesome. Awesome. Home growing for medical or home growing included with the recreational bill?
Home giving or home growing as in caregiving.
Okay. Okay. So on the medical side.
Yes.
So right now you're allowed to grow your own medical cannabis plants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not recreational plants.
Yes.
How many plants are you allowed as a medical patient?
I actually don't know the answer to that question.
No
I don't
problem.
know what the maximum is.
No problem. So let's get into some grow advice. You up for that?
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. You wanted to go deep on a particular topic. Do you remember what you put down?
No, I don't remember what I put down.
Okay, cool. You kind of specialize in cloning, and I was hoping you could
Yes,
give
definitely.
our audience a deep dive into your cloning practices.
Yes, so cloning is actually one of the first things that I ever learned in gardening. I've been doing it honestly since I was like 12. It's kind of funny. I was in this after school agriculture program and I had this guy, it was like this foreign man who was teaching me, and he told me that he could take a cutting from a plant and turn it into another plant. And me being 12 and little, I didn't know. I didn't believe him. I thought he was joking. And sure enough, he actually grew like a small tree from just like some rooting hormone. And he taught me how like the process works and how you can get plants to do that. And I just became addicted. I found every plant and just took cuttings of it and just kept trying to make them root, like a little science experiment in my kitchen. And, when I found out that that's kind of how you repopulate your flower rooms in the cannabis industry, like I was like, oh my gosh, I know how to do this already. This is so cool. And yeah, so I had a lot of fun. They used to call me the clone mom back in the day, and it was really cute. And at first it was kind of just, you take the cutting and you make this specific technique and you do this thing and you put it in a box and then it grows roots. And after a while, that became kind of monotonous to me. So I started to really dig into how are the roots formed and what helps the roots to form and why do we use this rooting hormone instead of this one and which rooting medium is best. And what I came to find out is that there's a lot of different ways to clone, and there's not necessarily a best way. It's kind of just depending on what your goals are and what your priorities are. And I actually have a few different SOPs, I guess you could call them, for cloning depending on what your environment is. So the most interesting thing to me as of right now is I'm really trying to dial in on my own recipe for cloning and just really trying to narrow down what is important here, what is essential to create some really strong, healthy clones that are going to be viable throughout the veg and flowering process. And it's really exciting because I'm working on things like strengthening their immunity from pathogens and, increasing not just the rooting, but just the abundance of roots, trying to get that lateral root growth going. And it's really exciting because every time I do this, I discover something different. It's just been really a lot of fun.
Can you share with us some of your learnings and some of your processes?
Yes. Yes. So one thing that I think a lot of people, I've heard of a lot of people taking cuttings from their veg plants, and I understand the logic behind that. You don't have to keep a mom room, etc. But I would caution against that just because I have found that when the plants have reached a certain level of maturity, which is about 2 to 3 months old, that's when they really start producing the best cuttings and like the healthiest and strongest cuttings. And I've also noticed that the plants at the tips, they have an abundance of meristemic cells, which is like you can kind of think of it as like stem cells. They haven't really made up their mind on whether they're going to be a stem or a leaf or a root. So it's a lot easier for them to become roots versus if all the cells there have already decided what they're going to be, which is usually where you find the lower growth. And if it has had more time to sit under the light, it's more adapted to that light and it'll be stronger throughout its life. And another thing is, a lot of people have this habit of kind of overdoing it with their nutrients. And what that kind of does is it creates these really swollen cells with very thin cell walls. And that actually makes those plants really attractive to pathogens like powdery mildew, for example. It makes it really easy for them to become systemic. And what you would probably prefer to do instead is to kind of create something called calcium pectate, which kind of forms this wall around the cell so that it's more difficult for pathogens to penetrate. And if you can do that from the point of it being a clone, then it will be stronger and more resistant to pathogens as it grows older and throughout its life.
Wow, those are really solid tips. Thank you. Can you walk us through just typically how you would take a clone right now?
Yeah, so I take really special care of my moms. They have a specially formulated recipe to help increase their root growth, and they get a lot of their nutrients through foliar feeding as opposed to ground level feeding. And the reason for that is that I want all of those nutrients to be at the point where I would take the cutting from the tips of the plants. And I give them a little bit lower dose of nitrogen and a little bit more zinc and a little tiny bit more phosphorus. And all of those elements kind of help to make it easier for the clones to take root. So I've actually recently just heard this one technique where people will actually leave their clones in a cup of water overnight. And when I first heard that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. But if you think about it, it actually eliminates any of the clones that would have a difficult time standing up on their own and wouldn't be able to adapt to the humidity. So all of the clones that end up going in your box are perfect and strong and beautiful and very well adapted. And so it actually kind of gets you your strongest set of clones. And one thing that I've noticed is that when you use rock wool, I prefer to use rock wool just because it's cleaner and it's a zero medium. It doesn't have anything in it already. So I'm kind of in control of what it has. And I don't have to kind of guess what's in it or how much of what is in it. And so we soak the rock wool in a little bit of a very, very, very light nutrient solution. And we go ahead and take those cuttings, the best of the ones that we've selected, and we use Clonex, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. That's definitely by far my favorite rooting hormone. And We just pop those guys in there, make sure that they're nice and misted. I prefer not to use an anti-wilt. Some people like to use the anti-wilt, but I feel that kind of clogs the stomata and kind of doesn't really give them a chance to adapt on their own. I feel like the more they do on their own, the stronger they're going to be.
Totally. I couldn't agree with that statement more.
Yeah. And then it's really just comes down to, making sure that they don't dry out, making sure that they're in the right environment. I like to do, a lot of people will do really, really high humidity. I don't like to do high humidity as much just because I feel like that kind of makes them vulnerable to pathogens. So I try to keep it in about 75% humidity, and I kind of just leave the temperature up to, I just kind of depends on if it's indoor or outdoor. I try to keep it somewhat close to the range of what it's going to be throughout its life, just to make sure that it's really well adapted. And then usually in about 7 or 8 days, we start to see some roots. And that's when we kind of increase the phosphorus uptake so that we can get that lateral root growth going.
Great.
And we transplant it.
Awesome. You keep saying we. Is this experience from your commercial cultivation experience?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I have a few friends that I have helped out. I have kind of like a group of people. We kind of like help each other out with tips and things like that.
Okay.
And cloning is one thing that I kind of have under wraps. So I'll go around and I'll teach other people how to clone their plants so that they can have success in their garden as well.
Cool. So everybody's got their specialty and you kind of pull from each other's knowledge base. Awesome. And we're going to get in here with a quick mention of one of our favorite partners, the amazing Dr. Zymes. It's truly amazing how this product has really just gotten out there. When I first heard about this product, it was in the Growcast interview with Patrick, the Soil King, and he was singing the praises about the amazing Dr. Zymes, and now everybody is using it. It's such an amazing product. It's a truly revolutionary green solution that kills and eliminates soft-bodied insects, molds, and mildews on your indoor or outdoor gardens. Not just cannabis plants, but all your plants. Head on over to amazingdrzymes.com and use code GROWCAST10, GROWCAST10 for 10% off. And our members at mygrowpass.com, which is opening up very shortly for membership, save 25%. And it's actually drzymes.com. Sorry, Dr. Zymes, not the amazing Dr. Zymes, although that'd be a great URL. So check them out, drzymes.com, for your top of the line, OMRI listed, clean, green, certified IPM solution. Now let's get back to it with Allie Grows Things. Let's talk about integrated pest management. You had a really great response to that question, and I'd like you to talk us through your IPM protocols.
So IPM used to really not be that much. I didn't really know anything. Like when I first started out growing, I didn't know what IPM was. It was kind of just like if I saw a problem, I dealt with it. And over time, I started to figure out that it's not really an if, it's kind of a when. And you really need to treat it that way, because even if you do have, the best of everything and you follow all the rules and you're really, really careful, you still have potential to have some issues. Sometimes things are just out of your control and you need to be prepared for that. And my first really big problem that I ran into in my home grow was I had a friend that I let come work on my garden a little bit. I was trying to teach him some things, and he had worked in some other gardens, and he brought a pest with him, which is commonly referred to as broad mites. And if you're familiar with broad mites, you know that they are very difficult to get rid of. And, they really have a very serious detrimental effect to your plants. And that was really my big first lesson in a lot of things. That was my first lesson in being careful and who I brought into my grow. It was my first lesson in a very serious and damaging pest problem. It was my first lesson in why the use of certain pesticides are really bad. I actually used a big no-no to eventually get rid of that problem. We ended up using something called Avid, and that was really bad. But I didn't know back then that it was really bad because I was still pretty little. I refer to myself as a baby in the industry back then.
Okay.
And through some experimentation, I eventually found a more environmentally friendly way of kind of reducing the amount of broad mites that were in my garden. We used something called diatomaceous earth, which on a very, very microscopic level, it's kind of like shards of glass. So broad mites have hard bodies, which is why they're so difficult to get rid of. And their underbellies, though, are kind of soft. So when they walk over this diatomaceous earth, it just rips their bodies to shreds, which is, pretty brutal. But obviously, it helped out my garden a lot more than using this horrible carcinogenic, pesticide thing.
Right, totally.
And that was kind of like my first window of awakening that like there are really dangerous things that people use on their plants that are really bad. And then there are things that are actually more natural and closer to the earth that actually have better results anyways. And, that kind of started an avalanche for me of really digging into preventative pest management and how to work with the plant and the soil to naturally prevent pests and mold and things like that.
And I bet you don't let any friends into your garden anymore, right?
No, not unless they have been vetted thoroughly.
Right on. So what do you do for IPM? Like, talk us through the beneficial foliar feeds and such.
Yeah, so calcium and silica are my two biggest things right now that really help to support my plants' cell walls, as I talked about earlier. And I also really try to dig into the ecology. And the thing that I have kind of been told, have learned from others, is that when you have an indoor garden, you kind of tend to sterilize your environment. So there's really nothing living except for your plants. And when you do that and you do get an invasive species that you don't want to be around, there's no natural predators to sort of check their population. And that's kind of where a lot of people really struggle because they've got this really bad pest or pathogen and they don't have anything to naturally combat it. So they end up using these really harsh chemicals and these really bad pesticides when you can actually just work with your plant's natural life cycle and build it up and build its strength and put things around it that will protect it, whether it's, beneficial pests or beneficial molds, things like that actually help it to, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say beneficial molds, beneficial fungus to help it to adapt to its environment and be a little bit stronger and happier.
Yeah, I don't think beneficial molds is one of those things that actually exist, but
no.
But thanks for correcting that for everybody.
Yeah.
So do you have like specifics? You said, was it potassium and silica?
Oh, calcium and silica.
Calcium. Okay.
Yeah, so calcium and silica kind of help to fortify your plant and just kind of like create a barrier. Powdery mildew is one that I've been studying recently, and powdery mildew is some really freaky stuff on a microscopic level. The spores will actually land on the leaf and they'll spit out this little germination tube that actually penetrates through the cell wall, and that's how it accesses the plant's water. And it's like horrifying to see. It's something out of a horror movie. But if you can really increase the level of calcium pectate that you have around the cell walls of your plant, then you can kind of prevent that from happening altogether. And what will happen is it will try to push out the germination tube, but it won't be able to penetrate through that layer and actually just dry up and die right there on the leaf because it'll essentially starve to death. It's really fascinating.
Wow. Wow. Can you walk us through how you use the diatomaceous earth? Do you sprinkle it on the top of your soil? Do you put it around your plants? Like, what's your process there?
Yeah, so I'll actually just take the dry diatomaceous earth and I will sprinkle it around the base of the plant. Usually I'll do that after a little while after a watering and just like around the top layer, because when you water those pests and stuff, they'll try to come up to escape the water. And so I'll put that diatomaceous earth and sprinkle it around the top, and I'll sprinkle it on the lower layer of leaves as well. And I'll probably do that for, I'm going to say about 2 weeks is usually my process. And I've only had to do that a few times. I haven't really wanted to invite that experiment into my life.
Sure.
Yeah. But the few times that I have done it, it's had some really good effects.
Cool. Have you found that, like, when you leave the de-earth on the top of the soil, or I guess I don't even know what you grow in yet, and then you water, like, it kind of clumps up and loses efficacy, don't you think?
Yeah, that's kind of why I do it after I've watered instead of watering it into the soil.
I must have missed that. Sorry. Or misheard your process, I guess. Cool. That's a great tip. So what was the best piece of advice that you've ever heard about growing cannabis or ever received?
I am very fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of people who are much, much, much smarter than me. And I'm very blessed that they impart their wisdom throughout the years to me. I actually just heard something kind of recently from somebody who told me that there is really no best way to do things. And the worst thing that you can do as a grower is to completely close your mind to any process except the one that you personally have tried. Somebody else might have a method and it might sound kind of funky to you, but neither of you might actually know the science behind what that works. And it's always good to keep an open mind and really try to understand what is working and how it's working instead of just disregarding it altogether, because the truth is we all have something to learn from each other. And the worst thing that you can do in your career is to completely cut yourself off from any new information.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that on this show, interviewing consultants. One of the regular questions I asked them was, what type of character traits make the best growers in their opinion? And typically it's always been, patience and open-mindedness are probably the top two that get mentioned. And it really stems around being willing to try new things, seeing those new things through to the end, and not really ruling something out because, like you said, environments change, rooms change, people change, plants change. So you don't want to say no to any one thing. So that was great advice there, Allie. Thanks so much.
Of course.
We are just about done here for this episode, and I really appreciate your time today. And I'm sure our audience really dug the interview. And this is the type of stuff that they eat up. So where can our audience kind of follow along on your growing journey?
So I do a pretty good job of documenting my commercial cannabis experience on my Instagram. You can find me at Allie_grows things. And it's kind of a combination of cannabis cultivation and also just plants in general as a whole. So yeah, you can find me there.
Cool. And last question we have for you. Any parting words of wisdom, last pieces of advice that you have for everybody listening to you today?
Oh my gosh, please, if you have any, knowledge or background or experience, please don't be shy about sharing that with other people, because this is all about learning. It's all about growing, and we can do so much better when we join forces and try to get around that competitive aspect that we have in this industry.
Right on. Those are great parting words to end an educational podcast on. So thank you again for your time today, Allie from the Phoenix area, Arizona. Really look forward to publishing this interview and letting our audience hear it. So happy growing, everybody.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks so much for having me.
So audience, make sure you give us a rating, a review, subscribe, and share this interview if you liked what you heard. And check us out on Instagram at The Homegrown Helpers and our other parent podcast, Growcast. Happy growing, everybody, and we'll catch you later.